Long after the British had left India at the mercy of their servants, which was represented by the Prime Minister, the minds of India and Indians continued to feel as subservient slaves. The British poisoned the minds of Indians in such a manner that everything that was India and their country was projected as inferior to the British. And that still shows to an extent that Indians feel ashamed to speak their own mother tongue and shamelessly follow the British in all forms of lifestyle, culture, and motives. Such has been the impact of this covert poisoning that a top grid manipulator implanted with an aim to rule the country and divide the country as well has been known as Mahatma, despite all questionable actions and intents. The hatred that Islamists and their supporters had for Indians reflected well in the continuation of the soft terrorism, and India is still a target of it. But has been portrayed in a well thought and organized and directed manner so that the inhabitants and the protagonists of the native land were stripped of their perceptual cover to fall in love with those enemies which were following the agenda of Gajwa Ahind, and who intended to be their terminators in the name of Ganga, Yamuna, Tehzeeb. The hallmark of the British shows now as the Indians take pride in being the best slaves in the world. They discard their local wisdom, their indigenous art and architecture, their ways to manage natural resources, their own ways to bond themselves and interpret every ingenious way the society lived majestically through the lenses of their colonial masters to draw the most ugly conclusion possible. Nehru and the entire Perji Gandhi clans carried the British legacy of poisoning the minds further. The poisoning done by the Gandhis and Nehrus never let India drop pride from its past and to feel proud and nationalistic. And that was done by distorting Indian history, disregarding ingenious methods of management, or appreciating everything that was grand in India. The seeds sown shows now when none of the youth know what their country was, how grand they were, and the same youth now shamelessly flaunt indignity as a lifestyle symbol, criticize the basics of what constitute Indianness without any ability to defend their words and actions. It is incomprehensible to think that only to prove that Islam was great and was a Bhaichara religion, the entire of Indian history was distorted, misplaced, and made poisonous, so much so that the enemies were always looking to strike a final cobra blow were the one with which the Indians were sleeping, and they were treated like brethren. It is beyond comprehension that how for 70 years Indians have been taught to celebrate Gyanvapi Masjid as a monument of Hindu-Muslim unity and Ganga Jamuna Tehzeeb, and not that it was a symbol of a hatredful massacre and intolerance of Islamic jihadists and their people. The Gyanvapi Masjid is a living testimony to the cruelty of the history and barbarism of the ugly invaders perpetrated by injecting a venom of false narrative where Indians have been taught to forget and ignore and super ignore the terrorists so that they have the vitamin of time, increase their strength and repeat the event that had taken in the past with an irreversible destruction. The names like Bakhtiyarpur are celebrated and not treated what historically it is. What can be a more lethal dose of poison than this notion? When the so-called first education minister of India stopped the Muslims going back to their looted land under the name Madre Watan, he poisoned the ethics of ethical Dalaites, and it shows now. When Ansari was representing India as the second most powerful constitutional authority in the country, the mind poisoning event continued at an even much faster pace. It is again beyond comprehension how an ingenious water harvesting and management system of Cholas and in Rajasthan and in the Ganga plains where no floods and droughts used to take place now feels miserable during both heavy rains as well as low rains. It is this lethal dose of poison that invites an even higher density of illness. It is with a reason why the people of India are anti-Indian themselves. Their minds have been poisoned beyond repair in every sphere. There is no terrorism, grave and serious, than poisoning the minds of people. When you control their minds, you control their actions. You control every action, including terrorism, sabotage terrorism, diplomatic terrorism, cultural terrorism, or even intellectual terrorism. These people become enemies of themselves. Truth itself can be made into a weapon, transparency a bomb, and love for a country as a lethal dose of poison as well. In this age of information asymmetry, and even more, our analytical ability is guided by its milieu. Our perceptions and feelings are guided by the information we consume, whether in history books, in newspaper, on television, or on social media, and only a few people try to reach for an explanation behind things that do or sometimes do not match the perceptions with logic. And in this of information warfare, information is meant to correct us and throw off track. If we have either followed a perception or are in the process of evolving a logical outcome on the basis of certain facts. Actions are mediated by decisions. Decisions have a foothold on perceptions, and perceptions are subject to manipulation. This paves the way for perception war under which we have been since the so-called independence. Haven't we faced this perception war in the last 17 years aimed at making it subservient and which has almost been in the form of an epidemic? That is infodemic. Infodemic has been fueled by information and perception war where we have been allowed to follow the right path because of deliberately set up information release and even withholding the information. Infodemic had an identity smothering effect and a psychological situation created to weaken our basic guard or thwart our naturally evolving logical outcome. Inability to gauge the enemy because of a state of mind that is either numb or dumb or even made inferior or apathetic is actually being in a state of constant war but without the danger of being an internecine war. The present state of being critical of everything without a reason or logic is a state of infodemic too. Anyone having a nefarious design and ill intent can create an infodemic guided by design thinking of winning it without actually fighting any war. So, it has been a war, a perception war that does not require any weapon. It only requires information manipulation and setting a narrative to create a serious malaise into thinking and a thinking system into a deep crisis. The worst will happen when we do not prepare for what we cannot see coming. And in our case, we choose to be blind for a long time in a deep slumber, refusing to wake up. A good information that is exhumed will always be under scrutiny and will be reminiscent of the ill wills of the masters of this art who will place many such misguided information to remove the coveted guard, that is kavach, a coveted guard of evolving logic that actually helps us prepare our mind to think of the many possibilities that are applied on us as a surgery to incapacitate us in the name of treatment and cure.
To have more such discussions and analysis, subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon for notifications on our upcoming videos.